The title of my brief talk is a question, which might appear to be, the answer might appear to be very obvious, but behind that question lies a very complex situation. I think we've heard already something about the complexity from our first speaker. So what I want to do, first of all, is to start by considering an example of emerging ICT which has occurred during the life of the ETICA project. And so my story starts in 2004. And this was the year of Web 2.0 and the realization of social media, which describes sites and web applications that allow its users to create and share content and to connect with one another. And I doubt that there is anyone in this room who has not used one piece of the social media landscape. And I would imagine that there's a few of you at this moment actually using some of the social media landscape, particularly those of you who've got your head down like this on your smartphones. Anyway, 3 years later, things changed. Enter the iPhone, and this radically changed the social media experience, because single-handedly it was the iPhone which was responsible for renewed interest in mobile web applications and design. And during 2007, we were busy writing, or Bernd was busy writing the ETICA bid, and we were oblivious of the change that would happen in the world when social media and smartphones operated in tandem. And if we now look at today, the world looks very different. And certainly the statistics point to the fact that we are now digital citizens. 400 million people have Facebook accounts, 126 million blogs exist, and I'm sure some of you have done that. Maybe some of you are, at the moment, participating in the 50 million daily tweets that are created. Tweets didn't exist when we started writing the ETICA project. And so the question is, what ethical issues surround us as digital citizens, and should we really be bothered about those things? And so what I want to do is I just want to consider one bit of that social media landscape, and that is the social network sites, which continues to attract a lot of interest. Social networking, there is a privacy agenda. A few days ago, Viviane Reding, the Vice President of the European Commission, gave an important political speech about social media and the rights of people. And in particular, she focused on social networking and laid out a new position in terms of how we ought to think about privacy, based on 4 pillars: the right to be forgotten, the fact that we should be transparent in terms of the way that we think about privacy issues. Privacy should be by default. So this is rather than opting out, you have to opt in to give information, which causes huge problems for marketing firms. And that's okay. Protection regardless of data locations. So if the data is held outside the European Union, it should be protected. So these were the 4 pillars. And certainly those things are important. They are very important. The whole concept of privacy in social networks is a key issue. But there is a but. And there is a big but about this. Privacy is the obvious ethical issue. But others exist in terms of social network sites, as in terms of other technologies, which are less obvious and may well be more important. Social network site ethics is a complexity of issues. And what I just want to do is just briefly touch upon 5 pieces of research which have been published since ETICA started, just to give you a sense of it is more than just privacy. The first one relates to public space. The social network sites is a new concept about public space. Users desire social interaction. Disclosing information plays an important role if they want to actually interact. But they may not wish to actually have that information publicly accessible to an unknown audience. And so hence a tension arises. And so how you run a social networking site has a huge ethical agenda simply related to the fact that we have this new public space. And that's got nothing to do with privacy. So a very interesting piece of work which has just been published. If you look about the concept of multiple usage, social interaction is the key thing in terms of social network sites. But but it's used for other things. For example, employees will use information on social network sites. They'll explore that for personal traits about prospective employees. That lawyers use social network sites to find incriminating information in terms of divorce and child custody cases. And this means that these social network sites, there's a sense of dual use. And it's not about military usage, second use. It's about social networks present a danger to participants and society as a whole if improperly accessed or used. So there's a dual use sort of concept about social network sites, which we really haven't touched upon. Monitoring, everybody knows that you can monitor the social network sites. Today it has become important in terms of the law, and there is legal precedence regarding this. A juvenile gang member was sentenced to probation, which included having no access to any social network site, so to minimise the temptation to contact other gang members. So we have judicial recognition that social network sites is a communication media that can be monitored, which changes dramatically the very concept of social network sites for us all. If I move swiftly on to the idea of shaping personality, teenage experience is one where adolescents shape their identity. And it's very interesting that adverts as part of social networking sites, the social networking site experience, have an impact on how or what teenagers will become. So targeted marketing, which uses data profiles from social networking sites, is about social manipulation. It is discriminatory. It is an ethical issue which needs to be addressed. And there's a very interesting paper about that shaping personality, which was published last year. And the last example is about moral agency. Very interesting work by Light and McGrath, which is this idea that embedded in a social networking site, the way it is structured and the way it operates, are moral norms and values. And as such, the technology shapes the user experience so that the technology is actually changing us as we use social networking sites. Those of you in the room who use social networking sites have been changed by that very use, and you probably didn't realise that. So those are just five examples of ethics related to social networking sites, which is more than just privacy. And it sort of raises a general issue about creating simple checklists, which I think you touched upon earlier, because creating a simple checklist about what we think are the ethical issues is a problem, because it simply promotes ethical compliance rather than ethical sensitivity. It is problematic. As Bernd said earlier, I helped to draft the ethical guidelines for ICT and FP7, and I find those current guidelines problematic in terms of the fact that they are an incomplete list, and there is also an issue of currency of issues. And there are two bits in those guidance, and the bits I've just highlighted, which try to act as an antidote. It is likely that new sensitive applications will come to the fore. Researchers should recognise that new dangers associated with the process of ICT research can exist. That was the first bit. And the second bit on the website talks about includes specific tasks or a specific work package that explicitly addresses ethical concerns. I've left out the bit at the beginning of that sentence, which was where appropriate. I have a real problem with the phrase where appropriate. It is a must, not a where appropriate. And I think what you've said ties in with that. I would doubt that those two bits of those guidance have been very rare, have been used not very many times. People have just simply ticked the list, they have complied. That is not what ethics is about. Okay, so I'll leave you with some final thoughts about current practice in ICT ethics. Littered in certainly official documentation that comes from the Commission, from the Union and elsewhere in terms of national documentation, there is the phrase ethics and privacy. It is a bad phrase. Privacy is part of ethics. We should be considering ethics, which happens to include privacy. We need to do that, and we need to make that stance, and we need to change the way that we actually present this issue to the European Union and beyond. We should ban the phrase ethics and privacy. Ethical compliance is insufficient, and I've given you the reasons for that. We don't want people just simply ticking lists and saying, yeah, it's a bureaucratic process which we've just heard upon, and you have a problem with that, and I totally share your problem about it being simply viewed as a bureaucratic process. Things are changing, yes, and we should support those who want to make those things change. So we should move away from ethical compliance and be very wary of creating simple checklists. It was very interesting. We just saw the list about the ethical issues related to ICT a moment ago from the first speaker. And if you look at those things, they're crazy. Because a lot of those things, very few ICT projects actually deal with. How many ICT projects deal with the need of using non-human primates, for example? And it is on that list. It is a crazy list. So creating simple checklists is problematic. We should focus on ethical sensitivity. Emerging ICTs will throw up complex issues which have to be addressed. Just think about the case study which I've given you in terms of social networking sites. 5 issues which do not appear on the current checklists that appear from the European Commission in terms of guidance for ethical issues. That is problematic. If we don't address those things, at best, we will fail to realise the potential benefits for us all, and at worst, it will be that we have risky ICT which could severely harm us or the environment. And that is why we need to care about the ethical issues of emerging ICT. Thank you very much.